Welcome back to Steel City Sports. So Paul George has officially signed with the Philadelphia 76ers, and this move honestly felt inevitable after the Clippers came out and publicly said they're not going to give Paul George a max contract. Now, as to why the Clippers did that, I have no idea. For the life of me, I cannot figure out what the Clippers were thinking with this. I mean, I think you can argue Paul George has been their best player since him and Kawhi went to LA. I know that they both have had injuries, but Paul George has been more available than Kawhi. He was the guy that led them to a conference final run back in 2021 after Kawhi got injured. So letting Paul George walk, getting no return for him, just letting him walk for nothing, it makes zero sense to me, especially whenever you put it in the context of the Clippers have the richest owner in the NBA. So you think money would not be an issue for this Clippers team. So why, for the life of me, I cannot figure this out. It literally melts my brain why the Clippers just let him walk over money. It wasn't like he was disgruntled in LA and he just wanted out. They just simply didn't want to give him a max contract. Well, what are you replacing Paul George with? The team you have now, a 33-year-old Kawhi Leonard, you're lucky if he plays half the year, and a 35-year-old James Harden who's clearly out of his prime. So what the fuck is the contingency plan to replace Paul George? Because I know it's been a disappointing team. And even if they would have brought back Paul George, I think their odds would have been slim to win the title. I probably would have put it at a 10% chance. But now that you let him walk, it's a 0% chance. This Clippers team doesn't have a shot without Paul George. So for the life of me, I cannot figure out why the Clippers did this. Why just let Paul George walk for nothing? It makes absolutely zero sense to me whatsoever. As for the 76ers, this is Christmas to them. This is this is everything they wanted. This is the perfect piece. This was their one piece that they needed. Because we talked about this after that series with the New York Knicks. It felt like Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey had to play flawless basketball in order for the Sixers team to even stand a chance in a playoff series. And now you bring in Paul George. I really think he is that missing piece because of the versatility he provides, and he's going to be able to take the burden off of Maxey, off of Embiid, and he's not, he knows his role coming into Philly. He's not expected to be the guy. He doesn't need to be the guy. You have a former MVP on this team with Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey, an emerging all-star. So it's the burden on Paul George is not going to be there like it was in LA, where he was expected to be, basically the co-leader of the team with Kawhi. And OKC, he was expected to be that. Obviously, with the Pacers, that was his team. This is the first time in Paul George's career where he's not really looked at as the guy that kind of needs to carry the franchise. So it's like a mutually beneficial fit, I think, because for Paul, he doesn't need to be the guy. He can just play his game. Excuse me. And for the Sixers, they really just needed another really good player to help out the stars they already have. So this is a flawless fit. The fact that they had to basically give up nothing. All they had to do was let Tobias Harris walk. And I know all the Sixers fans, they'll drive Tobias Harris to the airport. I just saw he signed with Detroit. He's going back to Detroit on a 2-year, $52 million deal. Congrats to Tobias and his agent. That guy gets paid. For the life of me, I don't know why. I'm just kidding. Maybe I'm not. But if you're a Sixers fan, you got to be ecstatic right now. This feels like the dream scenario for the Sixers. And it all goes back to that clip in the finals where Embiid and Paul George were sitting right next to each other, and they were asking Joel Embiid, what do you think you need to do to get better next year? And he's like, we need to add a couple pieces, as he's pointing to Paul George. I wonder if they're going to maybe fine Embiid now for tampering, but who gives a fuck about all that? Paul George is a 76er. This team is going to be really fun. Now, as to if they're going to win a finals, I don't know. It's too early to really go over all that. I think as of right now, they're probably the second or third best team in the Eastern Conference, which gives them a shot to get to the finals. Anytime you're in that upper echelon of your conference, you are going to be competing for a title because obviously Boston would be the clear favorite in the East right now. They're the reigning champs. I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it. I think the Boston Celtics have the best starting five since the KD Warriors. So for me, Boston is the clear-cut team in the East right now. But then right below them, I think you have the Knicks, and I think you have the Sixers now that they have Paul George. Now, which team is going to step up, I don't know. But that's going to be fascinating if we get that rematch now that they have added guys. The Knicks got Mikal Bridges, the Sixers got Paul George. kind of feels like an arms race in the Eastern Conference now. Like with these two teams, the Knicks and the Sixers, they're trying to gear up to battle for the postseason. And they also grabbed Eric Gordon. That's a good signing. He had a good year last year. So things are looking really good for Philly right now. After the failed experiment of James Harden, now you bring in another veteran guy. But I think Paul George just fits this team so much better, especially with how Maxey has grown into an all-star level guard. So we're going to keep talking about them all throughout the offseason. We're going to talk about their moves. But I did want to spend a little bit of time here at the end of the video kind of as a review of the Kawhi and Paul George Clippers era from 2019 to 2024. Just kind of wanted to talk about real quickly my thoughts of the era, what was going on. Like when they first signed there, I thought they were going to run the league. And I think everyone kind of thought that. After Kawhi having that monstrous playoff run, I think one of the best playoff runs of the past decade when you look at the teams that he took down, the stacked Sixers team, the MVP Giannis, and then the Dynasty Warriors. That run from Kawhi, people were arguing he was the best player in basketball after that run. So they got him and Paul George. Paul George was coming off a year where he finished third in MVP voting. It was his best year as a pro, I think you can argue, was 2019 OKC Paul George. He was incredible that year. So you got those two guys coming to the Clippers, and they had a really good team with role players. It just felt like the stars had aligned for this Clippers team that had went through a lot. Felt like they'd been cursed. They finally landed their stars, and they're both hometown guys. It just seemed like it was all going to fit perfectly. They were just never able to make it happen. 2020, obviously, the pandemic, the bubble happens. I don't know what the fuck happened with this Clippers team in the bubble, but it's one of the worst all-time collapses, them blowing a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets. And it's also the fashion in which they blew it. It looked like half the team didn't even really give a shit that it was happening. Paul George was pathetic in that series against the Nuggets. That's where he earned the name Pandemic P. So, yeah, it was a disaster. And they went into the bubble as the betting favorite, and they felt like they were going to meet the Lakers in the conference final. We were going to get this incredible matchup. It never happened. The Clippers shit their pants. The next year was the best year of the Kawhi PG era because they were able to reach the conference finals for the only time in the history of their franchise in 2021. They went on a great postseason run. They beat the Mavericks in the first round, a great series against Luka, who was insane. The second round of that series was against the one-seeded Jazz team. People forget how good that Jazz team was, at least in the regular season. And that's when Kawhi got hurt, and Paul George was able to lead that team past the Jazz as a one seed because he was just insane. You could argue that's the highest point of Paul George's career is when he led that Clippers team to the conference final. Then you also get them playing the Suns. They were very competitive in that. They lost. And then after that, it was really all downhill. Like they were never able to get anywhere near that high again of reaching the conference final. 2022, I can't even remember. I think Kawhi missed the entire year, I want to say. And Paul George didn't play much. 2023, which was last year, obviously right before the playoffs start, Paul George got injured, I think a game before the playoffs. And then game one against the Suns of the 2023 playoffs, first round, Kawhi got hurt. Then this year, they're all pretty much healthy, and they just get scorched by the Mavs. And obviously Kawhi, again, injured with the whatever in his knee, the inflammation. So that's kind of a rundown of the Clippers era with Paul George and Kawhi. It started off with unbelievable potential with so much upside. Looked like they had the pieces to win a title, if not multiple titles. And then through injuries, just fell apart. And it is kind of sad to see because I do remember the day that Kawhi and Paul George were brought together. I thought they were going to be dominant, and just see it now, it's over. It's officially done. And it really didn't amount to anything. If you're a Clippers fan, it does kind of have to suck. It does have to kind of burn you a little just to see how this team played out. As for the big thing that's circulating now on the internet is obviously the graphic of the Paul George trade. Everything the Clippers gave up to get Paul George, which was SGA, who I think most people now consider to be a top 5 player in the NBA. So that alone is really bad. But also you look at all the other shit they gave up to bring in Paul George, all the picks. I know one of those picks turned into Jalen Williams, who's now like a borderline all-star guy in his own right, and a ton of other stuff. There were so many assets that the Clippers gave up to bring in Paul George, and people were saying, is this the worst trade in NBA history? Well, in hindsight, yeah, I think you can really make that argument, but I think it's a mistake to bash on the Clippers for making that move, because any GM in the NBA would have done that move at that time, because that deal was contingent on Kawhi Leonard signing with the Clippers. Kawhi said, I'm only signing with the Clippers if you bring in another star, if you bring in Paul George. I think he specifically wanted Paul George because he wanted to have another wing, another versatile wing to play alongside. So any GM, any GM in the NBA would have done that to get Kawhi Leonard off that run, to get Paul George off that MVP level season. Any GM would have given up the farm. So I get it. It's fun now to clown on the Clippers, to say this is the worst trade, but at the time it 100% made sense to do that trade, and I think the Clippers, they wouldn't change it. I mean, now it's hard to say, because now they would, because SGA and all that, but at the time, you got to keep that in context. So let me know your thoughts on all this, about the Clippers era with PG and Kawhi. Let me know about the Sixers now. What do you think's their ceiling with Paul George? If you made it this far, I appreciate you listening to me ramble here. Please like and subscribe.